Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with a special episode, special mini-series with Rabbi Moshe Shulman. Rabbi, welcome back. It's good to see you as usual. Welcome, sir.
Yes, we said this is going to be a special show.
Yes, and this is a part one of handful. We don't know how many yet.
Rabbi Moshe Shulman answers one for Israel's anti-Semitic video.
Right, very good.
Those of you in America probably don't know about it so much. It does appear with English subtitles, but it was specifically made in Israel, and we'll get into everything that's in it. But a lot of that stuff comes from Nazi sites. Comes from a lot of attacks against the rabbis specifically, and Judaism in general, in a very scurrilous manner, libelous in many cases, which I want to address. And then after it came out, because there was a big, uproar about what was going on, they actually made a video also trying to explain why they were doing it. So what I want to do is I'm going to do a little bit about both.
Okay, very good.
To start off first, we're going to do, there are a couple of justifications that they give. One is that even though it would appear to be anti-Semitic, they claim it's not anti-Semitic because it's just within the family. And the second one is the claim that they make that it's really about who has the authority to make a decision. I don't want to discuss about that very much. After that, we're going to go through, one more thing before the video, is we're going to discuss, the video basically was about trying to say that the rabbis treat women in, was the language, it says there, that they advocate humiliating, beating, and murdering women. It sounds like it came from Nazi propaganda, and that's probably the closest thing it is to anything. But, so before I go into it, so it's that. And then I want to be, the last part of the introduction is basically we're going to go through what the Tanakh says with regards to women, and how it, in general, things as women is concerned, including a number of passages in the New Testament. And then we'll go through the scurrilous things that they have. We'll go through each and every one of them, show where, what they're doing and how really it's distortions and quite libelous, basically on the level of blood libel. Now, let's start. Okay. Before we want to start, I wanted to do something first, read a passage. This comes from a book from Dr. Michael Brown, as many people listening, or certainly Christians, Jewish Christians know. Dr. Michael Brown is probably the foremost Christian of Jewish background who's involved in evangelizing to Jews and deals with things. He's not written a number of books. He wrote a book called Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, which I'm going to read a passage from there. And he's working on a new book about Christian anti-Semitism, which he was kind enough to send me a passage, a chapter from that, which I'll quote from that also in a little bit later on. But the issue that he's talking about is how to deal with the rabbis, where the proper debate is, and with that. And he's got a lot of stuff in here, which I'm going to quote from time to time, basically attacking what the one for Israel people, especially Eitan Bar, do. Interestingly enough, Eitan Bar, in the beginning of his book, says that Dr. Brown was an inspiration for him, and yet he deals with it in a way which is totally different the way Dr. Brown does in his ways. And truth be told, Dr. Brown probably knows more about rabbinic literature and has taken a more balanced approach to it than he does, although we do have disagreements. So this is what Dr. Brown says. And we should keep this in mind when we're evaluating how these people are doing, because this is, remember, he's a top evangelist. He's a top person who goes and converts Jews to Christianity. He's not somebody that we like very much personally because of what he does. But, he's giving a view which is important to understand. And this is what he says. How then should we view these traditional rabbis? How should we think about religious Jews? Some might be hypocrites filled with spiritual pride. Some rabbis might be rabbis just like they think it's a good job, but many others are deeply sincere. Like Paul, they might be faultless as far as legalistic righteousness is concerned. They may even live better lives than many of us. I can testify about them that they are zealous for God, but the zeal is not based on knowledge. They are zealous to this very day. Let us then not be quick to judge and condemn. Instead, let us share our faith and compassion. Let us pour our souls to God, asking Him to break our hearts in prayer, to expose legalism and hypocrisy in our own lives. Let us intercede with our Father about this Bolshevikism. Okay, fine. His point is very simply, we have disagreements, and there's things he has a whole book writing about disagreements with the rabbinic literature as far as what they teach. But you will not find a drop of the kinds of attacks that we see here by Eitan Bar, basically coming from, we find them in they're not only neo-Nazi sites, but the answers to them are easily found on the internet. So, as Dr. Brown says, and which is, of course, my shows are dedicated, we'd much rather discuss, rather than these debunked things that are libelous and anti-Semitic, and in fact, in many cases, contradict what the New Testament teaches or the Tanakh itself teaches, let's deal with the issues that really separate us the most, which, of course, is what it says in Tanakh, how the Christians distort the true teachings. Now, there's an old saying that a lie can travel around the world before the truth gets its boots on, meaning that it's easy to spread a lot of these things, but it takes a while to until the truth gets up to it and is able to debunk it. I've seen that many times over the years with rabbinic literature. I spent years of trying to debunk many things that were not true about it, and it's taken many, many years until it becomes recognized by people who are seriously interested that, in fact, some of the things that were said were actually not true. Now, one of the things he tries to say is that this is an internal discussion. What does it mean, internal discussion? We know that among Jews, religious Jews, there are differences of a lot of issues. We sit down and talk about it, disagree about it. We certainly do not do the kinds of videos that he has. That's well outside of what you might call an internal discussion, which we'll see as we go through it. But, okay, let's deal with the issue of internal discussion among Judaism. Well, the problem is very simple. Among Jews, we talk amongst ourselves because we agree with the fundamentals. We practice Judaism. But the problem is that Eitan Bar is a Christian. He does not practice Judaism. He practices Christian religion. That's the religion that he has, is Christianity, not Judaism. Now, he calls himself a Messianic Jew. But the problem is like this. There's an old joke that I heard it came back to maybe Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. I heard it said his name, but it's not necessarily true. If you call a tag a leg, how many legs does a dog have? The answer is 4, because a tail is not a leg. So you may call yourself Jewish. You may call it, as far as religion, Messianic Jewish, as if it was a part of Judaism. And you can call it whatever you want, but it doesn't make it to be true. It's like calling a tail a leg. It's not that. Now, one of the problems is when you talk to people about that, they start talking, well, the early followers are Jewish and stuff like that, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not really factually true. Eitan Bar and One for Israel, they believe in the New Testament. They follow the teachings of Paul and things like that. But historically, we know about Jewish Christianity. There existed a Jewish Christianity for a number of centuries, although what they leave out is, in fact, that Jewish Christianity split from the Gentile Christianity very early in the first century. The split already started in the first century. We see it starting in Acts 15, where they have the first council, which is about 10, 15 years after Jesus died. It's their 40s, 50s in that time. So we see that there was a split between the Christianity going to Gentiles and the Christianity going to Jews. Not that we're Jews that didn't convert to the Gentile Christian, but it's the Gentile Christianity that split that gave us the New Testament that Eitan Bar looks at. He does not follow the teachings of the Jewish Christian sects, which we do know. They had their own gospels, and in general they repudiated Paul. They didn't hold from it, and they were actually considered to be heretics by the church, the Gentile church, which is where Eitan Bar and his historical traditions come from. It does not come from Jewish Christianity. That's a total bogus thing. It comes from a Gentile Christianity, the same Gentile Christianity that, the Catholic Church was the reciprocal, was the maintainer of the tradition until the Reformation, and then it split off, and they get their things from the Reformation. So the New Testament used is not a Jewish Christian document. It has nothing to do with Jewish Christianity at all. It has to do with the Gentile Christianity which developed over time. But even more, it's a known fact that appears even in books written about Messianic Judaism that in fact it's not in any way whatsoever from Judaism. Remember, when we talk about things coming out of Judaism, for example, conservative reform essentially did come out of Judaism. They were rebellions against a Judaism of the, 17th century, 18th century. Okay, and that's where they came from. At least they have the historical, factual basis to say that that's where they came from. However, Hebrew Jewish Messianic Judaism, which was originally called Hebrew Christianity in the early and middle 20th century, they didn't come from there. In fact, let me give you some quotes here. There's an interesting book which came out from Carol Harris Shapiro. It's called Messianic Judaism. She's a Reform rabbi, I believe, if I remember correctly. And she did a study which even Messianic Jews considered compelling and very even-handed. So she discusses Messianic Judaism, actually where it comes from. Okay? So, for example, on page 1, now remember, Eitan Bar is in Israel, but that's not where Messianic Judaism starts, in America. So she says here, Messianic Judaism is largely American Jewish Christian movement whose origins can be traced in the United States to Hebrew Christian missions to the Jews in the 19th and 20th century. The Jesus people of the late 1960s and 70s, and the resurgence of American Jewish ethnicity during the same decades. What she's saying here is very well known. Many of the organizations around in America that are very big, Jews for Jesus, or Chosen People's Ministry, for example, they all trace themselves back to important missions that existed in the early 20th century that were basically converting people to Christianity. No such thing as Messianic. They were converting Jews to Christianity. There was no bones about that. They were associated with churches, converting people to Christianity. Jews for Jesus came from Martin Rosen, who left a group called the American Board of Missions to the Jews, which was one of the oldest ones in the early 1920s, something like that, and made his organization Jews for Jesus. American Board didn't like that. Later on, the American Board of Missions to Jews changed its name to Chosen People's Ministry. So the two biggest ones in America actually trace themselves back historically to organizations of Christians who were going out converting Jews to Christianity. Okay? It has nothing to do with Judaism. Never had anything to do with Judaism, which it continues. Messianic Jewish congregation opposed both of those born Jewish and who would accept Jesus as a savior, and the Gentile supporters who adopted Jewish lifestyle. Okay, so again, it's both Jews and Gentiles. In fact, in America, it's almost largely Gentile. But even more, the whole type of synagogue type of worship, we know where that came from too. That goes back also about 30 years or so to a fellow named Phil Goebel, who was a Christian, not Jewish at all, who wrote a book, How to Grow a Messianic Synagogue. And all of the synagogues that now exist are based on that. And it was very highly praised from Darren McGavran, who was the head of missions for Fuller Theological Seminary, who praised it because of, using the ethnicity of Jewish ethnicity to bring Jews in. So we know where that came from. Okay? Now, one more quote from Harris here. That she says this. Many of the individuals who became leaders of the Messianic movement were educated evangelical and fundamentalist Bible schools, were ordained by Christian denomination, had conducted some form of Jewish missions work funded by Christian denominations. What does that mean? And this is going to have is very important for what we're discussing here. All of these people who were actually the teachers, Martin Rosen, the Baptist, okay? All of the main leaders that I know of are actually coming out of Christian, mainstream evangelical Christian organizations. They don't come from yeshivas. People leave them there. They came from Christian organizations. And that's where it comes from. Now there's more people who write different things on the same thing, clearly recognizing that Messianic Judaism is not Judaism, it's Christianity, but trying to masquerade as Judaism. There's a book by Baruch Maoz. He is somebody who lives in Israel, a missionary there. He wrote a book, Judaism is not Jewish. And this is what he says in very, very clear, without any, ambiguity. When we speak of a religious identity, talking about Messianic Jews, we must admit that we are Christians because Judaism is not biblical, while the true message of Christianity is. Eitan Bar, one for Israel, believe that that's true, as do Michael Brown and others said that, believe that the true Judaism, the true real biblical religion, if you want to say, is represented by Christianity and not by Judaism. They have nothing with Judaism. They are a Christian-based organization. Now, one more quote here from Dr. Brown I'd like to give that says the same message here. And I'd like to say it again to emphasize this. May the Lord have mercy on us lest our fleshly confidence completely undo us. We desperately need our non-Jewish brothers. We are not as much the fourth branch of Judaism as we are the Jewish part of Ecclesia, the Messiah's body, the God-built congregation, the church. It is only together with the rest of the body that we will be perfect. What he's saying here, for those of you who might not be familiar with it, is very simple. Those Jewish people who have Jewish backgrounds and believers are not part of the Jewish people, not part of Judaism. They are part of the church, an organization of people whose only qualification to enter it is belief in Jesus. That's it. That's their qualification for it. They have nothing to do with Judaism. They didn't come in from it in any way whatsoever. And we see, in fact, in America, speaking now, because I will speak with some issues that are specifically for Israelis as to why this is such a problem with Israelis, that we see that, in fact, the loyalty for evangelicals in America are not to America completely. They try to push their agendas on America. They want America to follow certain things that they want, so they're not really looking at it. And in Israel, it's the same way. Their nationality, or their the religious nationality, the whole thing is really Christianity and not Judaism. And because of that, it becomes a danger because they really are not interested in, their goal is interested in converting Jews in order to make the state to be a Christian state. They are Israelis, but they're Christian Israelis. They're not Jewish Israelis. They're Christian Israelis. They have abandoned Judaism, taken up a different religion, which is Christianity. And this follows exactly what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though I myself are not under the law, so that I win those under the law. Now, to put it is for my Israeli friends, what it means is, let's translate as an Israeli. To the Israelis, I became as an Israeli to win Israelis. I go on the IDF. I make myself into an Israeli patriot, make everybody think, but that's not why. Because I'm not under Israeli law. I'm a Christian. And that's really the problem with this kind of thing. And this is what they're doing. They're trying to fool people into thinking that they are something that they're not. Now, I mentioned that we find that the leadership, those people actually teaching these organizations, actually are not Jewish in training, have nothing to do. They actually are Christians who are masquerading as Jews. Now, we can do this. Let's just look at the one who's most important, with one for Israel, a fellow named Eitan Bar. Who is Eitan Bar? He's a nice young fellow, talks very well. From the video, we're going to find out that he bitterly hates Jewish people in Judaism. So what kind of person, what kind of an education did he get? Went from the best yeshivas in the world, looks like. He has the credentials from Ivy League Bible colleges. The first place that he got his bachelor's was from Israel College of the Bible. That is in the evangelical college that's in Israel, that's been there for a number of years. Now, the head of it is a fellow named Dr. Erez Saraf. Erez Saraf has his degree from a very important school, Wheaton College. Wheaton College is basically the Harvard of evangelical colleges. Those who've heard a fellow named Bart Ehrman, when he was an evangelical Christian, he went to Wheaton College because it was the best evangelical college around. And then he went to Princeton and he got involved in other things and eventually lost faith. Okay, let's continue. Where did he go after that? Did he go to any yeshiva? No. He got his master's degree from a place called Liberty University. Now, those in Israel who might not know who Liberty University is, in America we do, it was founded by that famous rabbi, Jerry Falwell. Okay, Jerry Falwell was very known for his activities in the political area of pushing evangelical Christianity in America. And its original name was Liberty Baptist College. So Eitan got his degree in a Baptist college, which is probably the type of Christianity he adheres to. After that, he's got his doctorate. He was on his way for his doctorate. Where is he doing that? Another high-level place, Dallas Theological Seminary. Dallas Theological Seminary is a very, very well-known and respected seminary. It has top scholars there, people who are known. I'll give you two of them who I know. I know of, one I know actually personally, I've dealt with him. One is called Daniel Wallace. We'll mention him later on. He's an apologist. He's still alive. He does extremely important work on New Testament texts. He's debated other people all the time. He's a very well-known person as far as that's concerned. Next is a fellow named Darrell Bock. Darrell Bock is important because he's very active behind the scenes in evangelism to Jews. He writes a number of books. He's a scholar and author. I've dealt with him many times, talked with him back and forth. We've written back and forth. He's a very, very sounded evangelical. Okay, he is in no way, and that place is no way has any relationship with Judaism whatsoever. And they don't make any kinds of claims to that. To go there, you have to believe 100% in Christian doctrine specifically coming from the Reformation, has absolutely nothing Jewish. So Eitan Bar by training is not Jewish. What he has, he's the same as any of the Christian missionaries. His claims to be Jewish and stuff like that is just false. So in the end, we have to say, and the truth of the matter is that this is not an internal discussion between people practicing Judaism and others. It's not. It's not like Lubavitch and Satmar have disagreements. It's not like religious Jews have disagreements about certain things in Israel, what's supposed to be. It has nothing to do with that. He is outside, and it's just as if any for example, I don't think that anybody would accept if an Israeli Christian would come and say anything against Judaism like these people are saying in their videos. Wouldn't happen. Just imagine the patriarch of Jerusalem coming out against Judaism and the rabbis the way he did in such a disgusting manner taken from that. I mean, it's very similar to what we're going to see. It's very similar to blood libels. We would never take it. And yet these people, by lying, are getting by. And the truth of the matter is, yes, he does have Jewish blood. But Jewish blood doesn't mean anything. The King of Spain has Jewish blood because conversios, people who's in Spain who converted, married into the royal family, married into many royal houses there. And eventually, the kings of Spain have Jewish blood. Does that mean that he's not a Christian? That means, as I said, no, it doesn't. Eitan Bar is a Christian, not a Jew. And any discussion he has is like any Christian Israeli who's saying something. He's a Christian Israeli. It's fine. Israel has Christians there. But don't say that you are speaking to us and you are, it's internal. What's more, and this is really a very serious concern, as we have a long history of people like Eitan Bar, people who were born into Jewish families, who left Judaism for one reason or another. And historically, there are a number of infamous people who brought destruction and death on the Jewish people who were from such types of families. So I just want to bring a few of them, just three, not four. Number one was a fellow named Tiberius Alexander. Now, unless you're really history buffs like I am, you don't know who Tiberius Alexander was. You know who his more famous uncle was, as far as the Jewish world, Philo from Alexandria. His father was the Elber of Ba'arch, which was sometimes a head for the Jewish community in Alexandria. He had a brother who was a very big merchant. But he himself became a pagan. In the first century of Judaism, around the time of Jesus, he became a pagan. Now, what's important about this fellow is, you would think that, well, he had Jewish background, he should have certain sensitivity. Well, when he was governor of Egypt, he slaughtered the Jews of Alexandria. He led his armies there and slaughtered the Jews of Alexandria. That's what a Jew who leaves Judaism does when he takes another religion. He loses his connection with Judaism to the point of death. But there's even more. We know about the Jewish war, the war between Rome and the Jews, starting in 66, where they rebelled. Well, at that time, Tiberius Alexander was very close with the son of Vespasian, Titus. They were very good friends. And he was basically his patron of the rest of his life. But during the war, what was his job? He was basically chief of staff, personally involved in the destruction of Jerusalem, the burning of the temple, and the slaughtering of people and enslaving many people. The Arch of Titus is named after Titus, but his right-hand man was Tiberius Alexander, a person born Jewish who left Judaism. Pretty much like Eitan Bar, isn't it? Let's go ahead another 100 years. 100 years later, we find that the Christian church, of course, which Eitan Bar descends from, not the Jewish Christian church, which was very small and petering out. We're talking about the Gentile Christian church, which had Jewish converts. So there was a famous person. His name was Melito of Sardis. He was actually a bishop at the time. He died somewhere around 180. And he was Jewish birth. Now, he was very famous because he is the first explicit place that we find that Jews are accused of killing God. It comes in his sermon, famous sermon, Parapascha, that he gave at the Passover time, because at that time Passover and Easter came out the same. It was later they changed it. This is what he said. God has been murdered. The king of Israel has been put to death by the Israelite right hand. First open statement that the Jewish people as a whole murdered God. Now, I don't know about you, but I would say if somebody told me that they murdered God, that would not endear me too much. But the question is, where does this come from? Where did he get this kind of stuff from? This venom against the people that he was born from. Well, we can actually look in the New Testament for it. In one of the letters ascribed to Paul, 1 Thessalonians, chapter 2, 15 and 16. Let's read what it says here. For you, brothers and sisters, became imitations of the churches of God in Christ Jesus that are in Judea. For you suffered the same things from your own compatriots as they did from the Jews, who killed both the Lord Jesus and the prophets and drove us out. They displeased God and opposed everyone. Oh, it's wonderful to say. This is what Eitan Bar believes is. So when we talk about your Israelis, not even religious Israelis, this is what he believes. God, they displease God and oppose everyone. Okay, the Jewish people killed God. They killed God, and they killed the prophets. That's pretty clear. Melito from Sardis, Bishop Melito of Sardis, clearly has a place. 1 Thessalonians talks about it. But not just there. The New Testament is full of things like that. There are numerous places. Let's go to Matthew 27, 22 to 25, one of the most famous and despicable, and I mean this very seriously, despicable things that you could find. So let's read. 22, Pilate said to them about, they wanted to choose Barabbas instead of Jesus. Then what should I do with Jesus who was called the Messiah? All of them, all of the people there said, let him be crucified. Then he asked, why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, let him be crucified. So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourself. Then the people as a whole answered, all the people again, all the Jewish people, his blood be on us and our children. His blood be on us and our children. The Jewish people have had 2,000 years of persecution, hatred from Christianity, starting with people like Bishop Melito, who really drew their venom and their hatred of Jewish people from the New Testament. You can give all kinds of explanations. It was a group of all the people, whatever, but that's not really the fact. The fact matters, their descendants live now, just like descendants of Gamaliel live now. That's where it comes from, even more. Let's look at John. John 8:43, 44. John 8:43, 44. Let's look what he says here. Wonderful words. Now, by the way, this is supposed to be a holy book. You are from your father the devil, speaking to Jewish Pharisees and people around. You are of your father the devil, and you choose to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks according to his known nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. That's verse 44. Now contemplate a second. Let's go back to exactly what Bishop Melito said. God has been murdered. The king of Israel has been put to death by an Israelite right hand. This venom, this deicide, Christ killers that have been screamed at Jewish kids for centuries and centuries, and still today. This venom comes from the New Testament. And this is what comes from this person who said it the first one, was a Jew like Eitan Bar, a Jew like all those members of One for Israel, who converted to that religion, Christianity. The Jewish Christians did not accept Thessalonians as part of the Bible. No. That was only the Gentile church. And that's where that hatred for Judaism comes from there. Let me, one more quote here. Where's that book? I had it over here a second. Sorry. Probably was going to be from this, but I will. Now, you might think that, it's Captain Missionary, what does he know? He's just complaining about this. So let me read to you from a book. This is called Mature Christianity in the 21st Century. And he quotes here from the Lutheran Council in 1972. And here's what they say. As a matter of fact, there can be such a basis in some biblical texts, for example, Matthew 27:25, his blood be on us and our children, and Revelation 2:9-39, synagogue of Satan. What needs to be said is that while these expressions are there in the New Testament, and I'm used in terrible ways in the light of the message of the New Testament as a whole, there can be no justification or excuse for anti-Semitism. So I always want to say, listen, yes, I said that. It's there. Backtracking, of course, I want to say, no, there's no justification for it because other things, but we can talk about some of that other things at other times. That's not the point. The point is it's there. Bishop Melito was the first one who talked about Jews killing Christians, specifically. A Jewish person, like Eitan Bar and One for Israel, left Judaism to become a Christian, changed their faith completely, have nothing to do with Christianity. And that's where it comes from. And this video shows, more than anything else, this video shows that this is not in the past. This is still in the present, that Jews who convert to Christianity become the bitter enemies of the Jewish people themselves. Let's do another one. This one most people who aren't Jewish history buffs would know. A fellow named Nicholas Donin. He lived in the 13th century. He was French. He converted to Christianity. And he became very important. He went to the Pope. And he went to the Pope accusing the Talmud, much like Eitan Bar did. Okay? The Pope ordered something to be done. The King of France actually picked it up and it was famous in 1240. There was a trial for the Talmud. It was already predetermined. It was burned. They burned all the Talmuds that were in France. This led to the Jewish people in France being expelled from France. They were forced to leave France under Philip Augustus, that French king's son, I think it was. This is what Jews who convert to Christianity do. In the end, they do that. Okay? Again, another very important person. Those people who know anything about Jewish history certainly know this infamous name, Father Tomas de Torquemada. Father Tomas de Torquemada has a very checkered history. First of all, he came from a family of conversios. Conversios means Jews who converted to Christianity. I think he had an uncle who was a bishop, actually, if I remember correctly. Now, his importance was extremely important. He was actually the confessor, the father confessor for Queen Isabella, of Isabella and Ferdinand fame. And in fact, he was one of the big people behind pushing for the expulsion of Jews from Spain. Somebody of Jewish background who became a Christian, who became a strong Christian that chose Christianity, he has to show he can persecute the Jews and hate the Jews more than anybody else. And of course, it's very well known even more that he was actually the head of the Inquisition, who searched out Jews who were very weak and couldn't leave Spain, so they wanted to stay there in order maybe to flee with their possessions to some other place. So they openly said that they were Jewish, that they were Christian, and they were quietly not. Interesting historical fact, which I'll just throw in here, which maybe you won't know. Many people talk very negatively about it, but there's a history to that. When Muslims, the Almohads, I think it was, went through Spain, and they forced conversions of Jews, and many Jews openly acted as if they were Muslim, but quietly kept Judaism. And after a few years, that settled down, and they were all allowed to go back to Judaism. This happened in Spain. And in Egypt also, there was a caliph who got very crazy. He converted everybody. Once he died, then permission was given for all the Jews to go back to their religion. Okay? So the expectation, of course, was that probably the same thing would go. Let this go over. So some of these people thought that that's what would happen. Spinoza, for example, came from a family of conversios who fled to Amsterdam. And there he was able to live openly as a Jew. He became a heretic, but that's a different story. So the reason for the morales happens to be that. But the bottom line was, this Torquemada, his job was to search out these Jews who would openly profess to be Catholic because they wanted to be able to flee the country with their possessions, go somewhere else, and search them out and torture and kill them. These are just a few examples, but the truth of the matter is throughout history, we see that the greatest dangers to the Jewish people really come from people who abandon any relationship with Judaism and become Christians. These are the people who are the biggest danger to us as a Jewish people. And for the Israelis, of course, it's a life and death situation. It's a very serious situation. Now, before we go away from it, I want to a little bit of an introduction, more of the danger that it has for Israel, to recognize two things. You will find many evangelicals who say that they love the Jewish people and stuff like that. And I'm not going to say it's not sincere. There are some who believe it. But in general, there's an ulterior motive. And we can see this kind of thing is that there's basically two approaches that Christianity has taken to Jewish people. One is one of love, trying to bring them in. And the other one is persecution. And interesting enough, we find both of these in Martin Luther. So Martin Luther, in his early days, when he convinced himself that he would be able to convert Jews to Christianity, this is what he said. Perhaps I will attract some of the Jews to the Christian faith. Again, he's talking about being nice to the Jewish people. Why? Not because that's the way you're supposed to be. You're supposed to treat Jew and Gentile the same. A complaint that they have, one of the complaints and Nazis say about the Jews, which are absolutely false, but whatever. Not because it's what you're supposed to do. No, that's not the reason. Perhaps I will attract some of the Jews to the Christian faith. For our fools, he's talking about Christians, the popes, bishops, sophists, and monks, of course, blockheads, have until this time so treated the Jews that if I had been a Jew and had seen such idiots and blockheads ruling and teaching the Christian religion, I'd have rather been a pig than a Christian. For they've dealt with the Jews as if they were dogs and not human beings. So that's the early Luther. Again, his intention of being good is, of course, so that they should convert to Christianity. But at least he's speaking, we should treat the Jewish people nicely. However, 20 or so years later, when he found out that the Jews didn't want to listen, but in fact, in the beginning of his book, on the Jews and their lies, from which this is taken, this is I took this from Mike Brown. There's a nice one quote that's very good, but in there it's even worse. It's more disgusting. If you have a strong stomach, you might want to look at that. He talks about how it's not just enough that the Jews, he would talk to them about that, trying to convince them, but they actually tried to convert him to Judaism. So that, after 20 years of seeing that he's not getting anywhere, what comes out? He says this. First, their synagogue should be set on fire. Secondly, their homes should likely be broken down and destroyed. Thirdly, they should be deprived of their prayer books and Talmuds. Fourthly, the rabbis must be forbidden under the threat of death to teach anyone. Fifth, passport and travel privilege should be absolutely be forbidden to the Jews. Sixthly, that to be stopped from Israel business. Seventhly, let the young and strong Jews and Jewesses be given the flail, the axe, the hoe, the spade, the distaff, and spindle, and let them earn their bread by the sweat of their noses. We have to drive the rascally raised bones out of our system. Therefore, away with them. To sum up, dear princes and nobles, what is princes, who had the actual power to do this and actually did this, who have Jews in your domains. If this advice of mine does not suit you, then find a better one, so that you and we may be free of this insufferable, devilish burden, the Jews. Now, the truth of the matter is Luther was actually the godfather of the Nazi Party. And all these things that he talked about was actually part of the Nazi organization. But we see a perfect example of what happens is they come with love, but the love is not because they love the Jewish people at all. They love the Jewish people because at the back of the mind is by showing them their Christian love, by shaming them, making them jealous, as Paul says, making them jealous for the gospel. It's in order to convert them. Again, there are some exceptions. I'm not going to talk about that, but in general, that's what it is, especially the evangelicals be that way. And when that doesn't work, what happens? Invariably, what happens is they turn against the Jewish people. We see this quite clearly. The non-evangelical churches in America, where they're not interested in converting people, they're very strongly anti-Israel. And we even see some kind of small amounts of change occurring in some evangelicals now also. Because that's really what the problem is from there. Now, again, back to Eitan Bar and the one for Israel people. This basically anti-Semitic libel against Judaism is basically the same plan that we've seen from Christians all along. That's how they treat us, always. And this is specifically, Israel is a very, very serious problem, because from the beginning, when Ben-Gurion set up the state, he set up with a certain balance between the religious and the non-religious. We all know that in Israel there's religious people, non-religious people. And the balance between the two has always been something that has been precarious, trying to keep the balance. But the balance between the two is necessary for the state to exist. But these Christians who are saying they're Jewish affect the balance that's in Israel. They increase the frictions. Their loyalty is not to Israel, as we said, as it says in Paul specifically says in 1 Corinthians 9, to a Jew in Israel. They act like the biggest Israelis. They're the most right-wing people, but they have no tolerance for. They're not, they don't fall into any category of Jew in Israel. They're the oath thing, and it's totally causes problems. Extreme positions that they have there, and eventually it's going to affect more problems there. So who are they really loyal to? First of all, the Christian, above anything else that the Christians believe, is what they're loyal to. Not to the state of its Christian beliefs. They could join the IDF. Why? Because they have to be part of Israeli society in order to infiltrate and become a part of it. Certainly not to the Jewish people. They follow what Paul says. So this kind of thing that they did here, attacking the Jewish people, attacking rabbis, attacking Judaism, overturned is going to cause extreme damage to Israeli society as it is today, where there is a precarious balance between the religious and non-religious, and it works itself out politically and otherwise. But most of the religious people would just like the non-religious people to leave them alone in their communities and not do it. So there's frictions, but that's not the way they believe. They want to try and push their way of life on people. There's many instances. So that's the end of the first part today.
Okay.
I'm going to take a little break. If you want to take a break for maybe 15 minutes, we can start the next section.
Okay, very good. Very good. All right, that sounds good. So you guys be sure to just stay tuned.
It actually was broken up pretty good.
Yeah, very nice.
I thought it would be more closer to an hour, but that's fine.
That's okay.
This is a natural break. So
okay.
This first part that I talked about, basically about Messianic Judaism being Christianity and its danger to Israeli society also. And remember, one other point that I should have made really is, remember, what happens in Israel affects Jews around the world. Israel has become the center of Judaism now. no matter which group you are, Israel is the center of it. And what happens there affects Jews all over the world, especially since we see a rise in anti-Semitism in America. America is no longer a good place for Jews. Europe, Jewish European communities are in very bad shape. London, Antwerp, places where a lot of Jews live. There's problem. France. It's very dangerous to be Jew in these places. It's basically, if you want to know what it was like for a Jew living in the Middle Ages, that's what it's like. Okay, so it's very dangerous. Israel is the only place. Israel and somewhat in America is where safety. Even America is going bad. So what happens in Israel has a very big effect. It's very significant for all the Jewish people. Okay, let's take a break and we'll deal with the second issue that's raised from his justification.
Very good, very good. Sounds like a good plan. Okay, we'll be back soon. Guys, stay tuned. We'll be back.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד.